Hello and welcome to STAT 441 at Virginia Commonwealth University. In this lecture, we will learn some basics about design of experiment. So first of all, what is an experiment? An experiment will be a process where we are trying to collect sample data, and the way we do that is by selecting the x's that we want to study and compare the mean response with various combinations of the x values. So in here, what we are doing is we are setting these x values in advance and then collecting the response based on these combinations of x values. So the procedure of selecting these sample data when we have these x values set in advance is called the design of experiment. Okay. Um, Here are some basics or parts of an experiment. So first of all, the investigator or the person who's conducting the experiment controls one or more independent variables. These variables will be called the treatment variables or the factors. So these are the x variables. And each of the x variable can contain two or more levels. The treatments will be combinations of these factor levels for different factors. So we have various x's, and then each x can take certain values. The combination of these values will be the different factor levels. The variable that we observe the effect on is called the dependent variable, and the response is measured to various levels of the independent variable. So the original experimental design was originated in the 1900s in England, and it was designed by R.A. Fisher mainly for agricultural experimentation. And the idea was that it takes a full year to obtain a single observation on a yield when you're experimenting with crops. So basically, to save time and money, it was important that they had smaller samples which would provide more information. So here are some terms associated with the design of experiment. So the first is the actual process of collecting sample data is called the experiment. The plan that is used to collect these samples is called the design of experiment. The variable measured in the experiment is called the response variable. This will be the variable y or the dependent variable. The object upon which the response y is measured is called the experimental units. The independent variable will be the x variables. They could be either quantitative or qualitative. And in relation to these, we measure the response variable y. So these independent variables are called the factors. The factors in the experiment will have various values or various settings of the factors. These values are called levels. A treatment will be a particular combination of these levels of the various factors involved in an experiment. So here's an example, and we'll try to use these terms to define everything. An experiment is conducted to determine the effects of temperature and pressure on the hardness of a new type of plastic, where hardness is rated on a scale of 1 to 10. At the time of molding, the pressure will be set at 200, 300, or 400 pounds psi, while the temperature will be set at 200 or 300 Fahrenheit. Three plastic molds are assigned randomly to each of the 3 by 2 combinations of temperature and pressure. So let's use the terms that we just learned. So first, what are the experimental units here? So the 18 plastic molds that we're using for the experimentation will be the experimental units. The response y is the variable of interest, which is our y variable, the plastic hardness level. In this case, y is a quantitative variable. Um, the the types of design that we are studying here, the response always will be a quantitative variable. The x's can be qualitative as well as quantitative. Okay, so what are the factors here? There are two factors in this experiment, the pressure and temperature. Okay, so here's a simple setup of this experiment. We have the temperature, which is set at 2 levels. The pressure is set at 3 levels. And each of the 18 moles, 3 are randomly assigned to each of the combinations of pressure and temperature. There are 6 combinations in all. So this is a very simple setup of an experiment with two factors. Okay, in this case, again, the treatment is a combination of the factor levels. So we saw one of the factors has 2 levels, the other one has 3 levels. So total is 3 times 2 or 6 treatments or 6 pressure and temperature combinations. You can see these are all 6 combinations. Now for designing an experiment, we can follow these steps. So the first step will be to select the factors that need to be included in the experiment and identify the parameters that are the object of study. So usually the target of parameters is the population mean. So we are usually trying to compare the population means associated with the various combinations or the various treatments. Then step 2 is choosing the treatment. So basically the factor level combinations that we want to include in the experiment. Step 3 will be to determine the number of observations that we want in each treatment group. So basically we decide what sample size we want. Step 4 will be plan how the treatments will be assigned to the experimental units. And this is the part where we will use various techniques on how to design this. Okay, so the first very commonly used types of designs are the noise reducing designs. The idea is that we want to remove any extraneous experimental variation. So we want uh, that the response is only affected by the treatments that we have chosen, and any external variation or the external variables should not have any impact on the results. So the idea is that the treatments that we have should be homogeneous for each of the experimental groups. So these types of designs are called the randomized block design, and we'll see a few examples. So to illustrate this, let's say we wanted to compare the mean length of time required to assemble a digital watch using 3 different methods of assembly, A, B, and C. And we want to compare the means of these 3 methods. We want to see if mu A versus mu B versus mu C, which one is the fastest, which one is the slowest, are 2 methods the same, so or are 3 methods the same. So we want to see or compare the 3 means using an experiment. Okay, so the first way to design this is called a completely randomized design. So basically what we can do is we can select 15 workers where in this case the workers will be the experimental units, and to each of these workers we randomly assign one of the 3 assembly methods. So that would be a completely randomized design. So something like this, we have 15 workers, we have these 3 treatment methods, A, B, or C, and then for each one we assign a method. So basically 5 workers will get method A, 5 workers will get method B, and 5 of the 15 will get method C. Okay, the problem with this design would be that not there will be a variation in this method due to how the workers are. So let's say a worker has more experience, he would be able to do it much faster than the other one. So we want a better design here. We want a better design where the worker to worker variability does not impact our results. of mean assembly time. So what we can do here is we can use another method in which we only have 5 workers, and we have each worker assemble 3 digital watches using 3 different methods, the A, B, and C. Okay, so something like this. So we have 3 treatment methods here. P is 3, and the workers are the blocks. So basically, we are blocking the variability due to the workers. So worker 1 uses either method A, B, or C. Same for worker 2. He will use both methods A, B, and C to assemble 3 different watches, and so on and so forth. Okay, so this showed that there were 5 workers. Each worker can be viewed as a block of 3 experimental units. Okay, and then each assembled block will use methods A, B, and C, and each worker will use methods A, B, and C. Okay, so this is a generalized randomized block design. So we block by we create blocks based on whatever object is causing the variability, and each block is assigned all of the treatments. So again, this is randomized, so we don't know, we don't want to put them in order. Maybe by the time the worker is doing the fourth assembly, he gets tired or slowed down, so we want to make sure this is also randomized. Okay, so here is the summary for a randomized block design. A randomized block design can be used to compare P treatments involving B blocks, and each containing P relatively homogeneous experimental units. So each block will contain all of the experimental units, and these P treatments again are randomly assigned to the experimental units within the block, with one experimental unit assigned per treatment. Okay, so here's another example. Suppose you want to compare the abilities of 4 Department of Transportation engineers, A, B, C, and D, to estimate the cost of road construction contracts. How do you use a completely randomized design here? Will there be any problems? And how do you implement a randomized block design? Okay, so so let's say we decide to use a completely randomized block design for the DOT experiment, where we want to compare the mean construction cost, and it will be influenced by the nature of the road contract. So basically, if we randomly assign these uh, contracts to these engineers A, B, C, and D, what we will see is that some of the contracts might be easier to estimate than the others, and the there will be some which will be more difficult. So it will be hard to compare the treatment costs. Okay, so in this case, we will have contract to contract variability. Some contracts are easier, some contracts are harder. Um, and so what we can do is we can select basically 10 road contracts, and this will be our block. And each DOT engineer will estimate the cost of each of the 10 contracts. Okay, that way we can get rid of the variability due to the contracts. So something like this. So first contract, each engineer takes whatever time to estimate the cost of the contract. Okay, so same way for the second, and so on and so forth. So now after this, we can compare the times that each of the engineer is taking to estimate the cost. Okay, so this definitely is a better design compared to a randomized block design. If we had just randomly assigned these 10 uh, contracts to these 4 engineers, or to keep the same number, let's say we started with 12 contracts and we randomly gave each one of the engineers 3 contracts, then maybe person A got too easy in one one which takes more time versus person D who got all three which took more time. So that then it will be hard to compare the mean time. Okay, in this method, what we are doing is we are blocking the variability caused due to the difference in the contracts. All right, so this was just a general idea of what the design of experiments is. There are various other ways to design an experiment, but this is all for now. Thanks for watching.